Hello, this is Maggie DeRocher, the host of the inaugural Neighbors Helping Neighbors podcast from Father Joe's Villages. This will be the first in a series of podcasts that will explore issues surrounding homelessness, its causes, and solutions to addressing the issue. Our guests will include experts and leaders in the space, as well as people with unique perspectives on homelessness. Today we have with us Deacon Jim, President and CEO of Father Joe's Villages, San Diego's oldest and largest homelessness service provider, and Tamara Kohler, CEO of Regional Task Force on Homelessness in San Diego, that serves as funder, promoter of best practices, and policy leader in San Diego's collective efforts to end homelessness. If you'd like to learn more about our mission, visit us at neighbor.org or follow us at Father Joe's Villages. So welcome, Tamara and Deacon Jim. You're both experts on this topic, and I appreciate you coming here to discuss the state of homelessness and solutions. Let's start by having you each introduce your organization and your mission.
Well, thank you. You want to go first?
No, you go first, Tamara.
Well, thank you. I'm Tamara Kohler. I'm the CEO of the Regional Task Force on Homelessness. We are what is known as a continuum of care body, so that's federally authorized. We are the lead organization for planning, for policy, for best practices. We're known for our regional plan that we've put together and also data. So point in time, regional data that comes out. We are really the convener in this work. And our mission and focus is that homelessness in San Diego becomes a rare experience. If you have that experience, it's brief. And we use the term non-reoccurring, which means that you're stably housed and you don't return to homelessness.
Thank you for joining us, Tamara.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's a pleasure to be with you. In fact, I serve on the continuum of care with one of the services providers, Father Joe's Villages is. It's my pleasure to work with Tamara. So Father Joe's Villages is, as you mentioned, Maggie, it's the oldest homeless services provider in Southern California. In fact, we're nearing our 75th anniversary.
Wow.
We have to prepare for that in a couple of years, right? So that's exciting. And it came into its own back in the 80s when Father Joe Carroll came on the scene. And at that point in time, all the services were really scattered. There wasn't one organization that was available that was able to help an individual from soup to nuts in a sense, right? And Father Joe recognized that. So he put together talk about continuum, right?
Yeah.
I mean, so a continuum of care, right, across the board within our organization so that if you have health needs, that's addressed. If you have children, well, we hope the children, of course, basic needs are covered as well, and employment, right? So really across the board, shelter, how important shelter is, right? He was one of the first ones out there in the 90s, actually, building affordable housing. And so we continue our legacy now, and we center it around those four pillars, right? Pretty much of what I just mentioned. It's meeting those basic needs, right? It's making health a priority. Investing in our children is so very important. I'll talk about each of these as we progress in this segment. And then lastly, strengthening self-sufficiency.
Wonderful. Thank you. So what is the state of homelessness? Can you tell me about the landscape and the size of the issue?
Well, I'll take a stab at it
Yeah,
first,
yeah,
seeing as we're sort of known for
Absolutely.
data. So I'll share a little bit of numbers, but I'll always ground my work in that behind every number, there is an individual. So I think it's always important that when we talk about numbers, and these numbers are large, that they represent individuals. As Deacon Vargas said, many of them being children, seniors, veterans, but we're seeing nationally on one given night, over 500,000 folks experiencing homelessness. And California, unfortunately, has about 25% of that population on any given night. So about 125,000 individuals on any given night. And we're also responsible for the point in time. So this last year, we've seen historic numbers, over 10,000 individuals on one given night in San Diego experiencing homelessness, both sheltered and unsheltered. And so our numbers are challenging. But I'll also say that was on one given night. We also track data every day. And we know last year over 41,000 individuals touched our homeless system, some for short stays in shelters, some spending an entire year of homelessness. So from a understanding numbers, we're seeing as historic numbers. We also are seeing more people 55 or older experiencing homelessness for the first time. We are seeing more families, two-parent families experiencing homelessness that young adult population, and just generally greater needs across the board today, I think. And we're that's why it's so important that we have the partnerships that we do and need all of our providers in this work.
Right, and greater need, as you mentioned. Also, the face of homelessness has changed, right? That profile used to be an older face, used to be mostly a male face. And now, as you mentioned, it's across the board. We have children on the streets, right?
More women historically than ever.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And that's, so if you think about the reasons for it, right? A lot of people ask me or just assume that it's because of substance use disorder or mental health challenges. And yet the number one reason for people falling into homelessness in San Diego is an economic one. It's just very expensive to live here. When you think about the fact that an average apartment costs about $2,700, and then the rental vacancy rate right now is at about 3.5%, that means no sooner does an apartment come on the market, it gets scooped up, and not by our population, obviously, because it's beyond them.
Absolutely.
So the economics are what it's all about. That's what's throwing people into homelessness. And we know that housing is what breaks that cycle of homelessness, right? So there's just a lot at play there. Not to say that substance use disorder and mental health challenges don't exacerbate the situation, because they do. I mean, we see it, what is it now, maybe about 40%? We're suffering from either or both.
And we know that because it is a tight rental market, people are experiencing homelessness longer than they have historically. We see longer lengths of stay, which exacerbates any sort of health condition. So to your point, substance use, if that was an issue at all, it gets exasperated the longer they're experiencing homelessness. The same thing with mental health issues. But we know the majority of people with mental health issues are housed. The majority of substance, both legal and illegal, are housed. This is truly a housing issue at its core. There's lots of good data behind it. But, living in San Diego, we know it's a very expensive market. So we're one of those communities, unfortunately, that's known for having a high homeless population, but it correlates with our high housing costs and low vacancy.
And to that point, people ask me, I'm sure they ask you as well, Tamara, is it because of what you just said? Does it mean that more people are coming in as a result of the nice weather and so forth? Are most of the people not from here? And I know that's not the case, but you ask a question during your point in time count each and every single year. One of those survey questions. Why don't you talk about that?
We ask that, and we ask it not because it's required. We conduct the point in time. Federally, we're required to do it to bring funding to the community. But we ask it because I hear it so often that people come here because the weather's great. The truth of it is we all came here for some reason, usually work, opportunities, families here, school. The majority of folks experience homelessness in the community they were last housed. 85% of those that we surveyed said they experienced homelessness here in San Diego, the last place they were housed in San Diego. And I'll just say for most of us, if you were to lose your housing, let's just even say you're locked out of your housing for a day, you don't think, where's the cheapest place I can maybe find additional housing? You stay close to home, because we're connected to community. So these are San Diegans, many of them who came here for opportunity. And, it's challenging. San Diego's tough in housing, and it's also challenging to, if you're not living paycheck to paycheck, it's rare. And I think you also have, we have just very limited housing stock. We don't have a diversity of housing stock, which you guys have done a fantastic job bringing more housing, because we just don't have even the housing that meets the needs, too.
You're right, Tamara. You're right. I mean, at the end of the day, housing is what makes a difference. Just a couple of months ago, I'm sure you remember, we had a press conference. We're going to be building, God willing, and breaking ground in the second half of that next year on 2 buildings. Right, 105 homes each, right? About half PSH, permanent supportive housing, for those who are struggling through chronic substance use disorder and have mental health challenges. And so you're right, that breaks the cycle of homelessness, along with the comprehensive services, because you and I know that it's not just a matter of placing people within 4 walls and walking away, right?
Absolutely.
Some of them need those services for the rest of their lives, but that's why 96% of those who we help into housing at Father Joe's Villages retain their housing long term. So housing is the name of the game. Yeah.
Before we get into more solutions, can you tell us more about the point in time count data and how that's collected?
Absolutely. It's a huge effort. It's required, federally required of continuums of care. It is a early morning count. And so on the last weekend in January, because historically, nationally, that's one of the coldest times of the year. So if people can find any level of shelter, they're going to do that. Put their money together for a hotel room, whatever that looks like. So the date is set the last week in January. We do it for that Thursday night, and we have 36 deployment sites around the region. So we have the entire county as a geography we're responsible for. And we put out, I think it was 1,900 volunteers this last year to literally canvass the community in areas, some people say, well, we went out and didn't find anyone. That, to me, is what I want to hear. Instead, we find far too many individuals in vehicles, sleeping in other places not meant for habitation. If it's a tent, we ask. We let them know we're surveying. We give a gift card for them to participate. We ask demographic information, household information. So we want to make sure that we're counting folks. And so if it's a tent, we talk to, good morning. We're doing this count. Can we ask a couple questions and get a really good, it is a minimum count. We're not going to find everybody. But it also helps us understand on at least one night what the population looks like. It was sort of it's important for trend data. It's also important for folks that are interested in understanding homelessness. Right. There is nothing like having a conversation with someone and asking them why they're experiencing homelessness. At that point, I'm not delivering services, not talking about a program or where shelter is at. I'm having a conversation early in the morning, understanding why someone experienced homelessness. It has been profound for folks to participate in it, which I think is important. It's a great community engagement piece, but those numbers are sent to the federal government and on a state level to bring resources to our community. It is not, if we show more numbers, we get more money because there's a formula behind it. But if we didn't do the count, we risk losing funding for our community. What has been fantastic is that one night was a data set that we used for years. Now we put out data almost monthly. We do a inflow and outflow report because I think the tone in our communities about the work when people were seeing more people experiencing homelessness was that what we were doing wasn't working, that housing wasn't working, that our providers weren't working. And what we were able to show is that every month we were housing hundreds of folks, but we were also seeing far too many people experiencing homelessness for the first time. So our homeless population is changing in the sense that more people are now experiencing homelessness for the first time than we've ever seen. I think our last numbers were a little over 1,200 people experiencing homelessness for the first time and over 820 folks housed. So we need to be housing the inflow and outflow to have those match. But the numbers matter to really understand the work that we're doing and to get a clear picture. We also share the numbers of those that are veterans, those that are seniors, and those who are families, because I think it helps us organize our resources, what housing programs we need. But it has gotten to be such an important issue that it's important we don't just look at it once a year on the data, but that we're looking at it monthly as well.
Well, and to your point, this is the first time in the recent years where we're more people falling onto the streets than we're being able to help into housing. I think that phenomenon has been in this recent year. Prior to that, that wasn't the case, right? And that's very extremely alarming. And that's, again, because of the economics and inflation and what's been happening, especially after the pandemic. Again, eviction moratoriums were lifted. There are a lot of things, safeguards that have been put in place, and now suddenly it's changed. The landscape has changed. So yeah, it's. I would expect it's going to continue in this way. Not to say that there aren't a lot of things, good things that are happening, to your point. I mean, there are a lot of successes, right? We can't. The fact that we report that more people are falling onto the streets than are being housed doesn't mean that it should downplay those who we're helping to be housed, right? So there's a lot that's going on.
Right. Yeah. Both Father Joe's and RTFH work so hard on this issue. Where do we go next? How do we fix this?
Good question.
Well, I wouldn't do this work if I didn't believe that it's a solvable problem. I'm incredibly hopeful, even as our numbers trend in the wrong direction. The things that I know about this work and why I get up every day really motivated for this work is it really is a housing issue and then the right level of supports. Everyone I know is successful in housing with the right level of supports, right? When my grandmother needed housing with a different level of supports, right, we actually had to move her out of her home into a different level of housing. So I think it's important to really think about what it is that we're trying to solve. And I think it is important to understand the changes in the population of when you say, where do we go from here? We need to continue to trust the providers and the good work and the proven practices. But we also need to evolve to what the needs of the population are. That first-time homelessness, a lot of that is just an economic issue. So being able to help people in that first-time homeless, a little bit of financial support, but also understanding we're seeing more families, we're seeing more women, we're seeing changes in the population. So I think evolving our programs in ways that really meet the needs of folks experiencing homelessness is important. And we have opportunity, I think, in San Diego. Our numbers are not at a place that seems untenable, that we can't get our arms around it. But I think of, like you said, your 2 new permanent supportive housing. We need to think about housing really robustly and differently too.
Absolutely. And your point is well taken. We need to meet people where they are. I mean, and that's the one thing that Father Joe's Villages has done really historically, right? It's not a cookie cutter approach. It's really meeting people where they are. It's tailoring the program so that you could be most effective in providing the resources that they need, and also efficient in the dollars, the precious dollars that we have, whether they're public funds or private funds as well. And we're finding that more and more, even as we go onto the streets, when we talk about our health center, right? And we talk about the street health that we instituted back in 2019, and that's grown exponentially. Now we've added psychiatric clinicians. Why? Because we're finding that those on the streets, right, need that level of care or medication-assisted treatment for those who want to wean off of substances as well. You know, just on MAT, medication-assisted treatment, what we're finding, thank God we're able to do this, is that an individual, if today they come in and they say, you know what, I'm over these drugs, I need help, we see them that very day and we start working with them. Right. And that's extremely important because they may not feel that way the following morning. So you have to seize that opportunity. Again, that's meeting people where they are. And shelters, I mean, yes, we need housing at the end of the day breaks the cycle of homelessness, but we recognize that we're not there totally yet. In the interim, we need that shelter and we need a diversity in shelter. One of the things we've been finding, Tamara, is that people are clamoring for sober living environments. A lot of them have been victims of substance use in the past, right? And now they don't want to be around that environment. And so that's not publicly funded, as we know, but we have philanthropists who believe in that. And so we have sober living areas, right? Again, why? Because we're meeting, that's their expectation. That's what they need at this point in time. So we have that. On the other side of it, we also know that to expect sobriety from a certain portion of the population whose brain chemistry is so fried because of the use of drugs, that means we would be relegating them to the streets and to death. We know, speaking of counts, this recent year, 600 individuals have died in the streets, half of whom have died from drug overdoses, right? Fentanyl is wreaking havoc.
Well, and it's why your mobile medical is so important, right? The importance is we've seen numbers increase. We also are seeing people experiencing homelessness longer and not having enough adequate, really focused shelter that meets all of those various needs. Then you have to take services to where people are at. Right. And that's where your mobile medical is so powerful and important. The ability, as you said, we need multiple opportunities. We need multiple exits from the experience of homelessness. People want treatment. Yes. People want sober living. People want low barrier where, right, I just need a place to be and someone to begin that journey, whatever that may look like. And I think it's the level of, again, the right level of supports in all of its variations are so important. Our work is always to advocate for the lowest barrier, but that's also because we want it for the person who right now can't choose any of those things, just need to be safely sheltered. But that level of support is so critical. And we talk about housing a lot, but again, that's why I say everyone is successful in housing with the right level of supports in all of its variations.
That's the key. Absolutely.
So it sounds like a warm meal and a shelter bed are very important parts of the solution, but housing and supportive services are what really empower a person towards self-sufficiency.
And I think self-sufficiency is the space of recovery from homelessness. Homelessness is not a title. It's not something that sticks with you your entire life. And we see people in their homelessness every day through various programs or just a level of support to get there to connect with family, friends. And the vast majority never return to homelessness. And it's because that level of self-sufficiency, understanding how they connect to the system, having a different level of supports is really recovery from homelessness, which is so important. Some people will never leave the system of permanent supportive housing, but a vast majority leave it with the right level of supports to move on. And we need communities to embrace that. Someone having a homeless experience, right, shouldn't be a reason that we don't want them in our communities, because ultimately you can't tell the difference between someone who has had a homeless experience a few years after they've been housed than someone else who is renting. Right. It is amazing. I visited so many people in your housing, and I think that understanding that people, can leave the experience of homelessness behind them if they're housed with the right level of supports.
That's correct. And you mentioned some may be in the PSH system forever, and that's okay.
Yeah.
Because that means they're housed, right?
Right.
And they just need that level of support, and it could just very well be because of their circumstances forever. And, you mentioned, Maggie, empowerment, and that's so very, very important. One of the ways to empower is through employment. Yeah. For all of us, employment is important, right? It's no less for those who we serve. I mean, we just expanded our employment center, and we call it the Gene Burkhardt Employment Education Center because of a generous donation from him. And I'm so appreciative because this has now allowed us really to expand our services. We know that through our vocational training comes marketable skills. With that comes employment and then income and self-sufficiency. And you mentioned, Tamara, that behind all these numbers, I mean, you and I can spout numbers all day, right? But behind all these numbers are individuals. And, Terry, who spoke at our grand reopening of our employment center. Oh, you would love him, by the way. I need to introduce you to Terry. He's a great guy. He's such an optimistic and positive individual, despite all the heartache and hardships that he's had in life. And he spoke there so eloquently, actually, and mentioned that he really had become down and out and had lost the ability to pay his rent. And he wound up on the street. And the day that he found Father Joe's Villages, to hear him say that, it was like we were this beacon for him, and it's changed his life. And he talks about that. And it's wonderful to hear him speak about that, about his travails and how he's been helped. And it's through the employment center, right? He's now gone through the employment center. He's working at Petco Park. Right? And not only is he working there, he has gotten some increases, and he's only been there about a year, but he's gotten some increases. And he whispered in my ear, he didn't want to say it outrightly at the grand reopening, but he said, and they want to make me a supervisor, but I'm apprehensive about that because I don't know if I can do that. And I looked at him because I'm so proud of him, and I said, you can do it. Absolutely. All right, they see that in you. There's a reason they see that in you. You take it on, you're going to be just fine, right? So Terry, one of the many successes, right? And that's what it's all about.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Tamara, you mentioned the community coming together. What can community members do to help?
I think there are probably three good ways. I think we need to educate ourselves on what homelessness is and isn't. I think there's a lot of, misinformation out there. I also think that we many times judge the homeless population by something really challenging that we may see. And when you think about, hey, I saw someone at their worst moment in public on a sidewalk, when you think about that, realize there are over 10,000 people on any given night in San Diego experiencing homelessness. That one person doesn't represent 10,000 people. The majority of them are just trying to put kind of the pieces together. And I think that is really important to keep an open mind. That majority of folks are San Diegans. They are people you probably ran into at the grocery store, worked in various ways, maybe someone you went to school with. Humanizing homelessness, that it's about people at their worst moment. I hope no one ever sees my worst moment out in public in front of everyone, so remembering that. There really great providers. I'm just honored to be here with you all for Father Joe's Villages. But throughout the region, we have incredible providers that really need the support, the donations from community partners. And if you can't give, I say it the same thing to my board. I have 2 boards, time, talent, and treasury. So if you can give financially, great. If not, you can volunteer. What are your talents? Where can you give back? And then there are some activities like Point in Time that you can volunteer to participate in. And the final one is when be aware of what's going on in your community. If you have a city council that is trying to site housing, if you have a developer that's trying to site housing, we need to embrace change if we want to see change in our homeless population, which means our house is going to look different. Our communities are going to look different. And that's how communities thrive. So any way that people can support their communities in increasing housing in San Diego is a benefit for anyone. Our aging population, our students, our people who are in their first job and kind of piecing together those costs.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, I have a couple more that I can add, but before I do that, because your point about the stigma sometimes that people carry around there, and the one of the things that pops into my mind at least once a day, I would say, is the saying, "There, but for the grace of God, go I." And we've seen it time and time again, crossing our threshold, people who have been well established, have been teachers, have been lawyers, have been engineers, and now suddenly something has happened in their lives, and they wind up at Father Joe's Villages, right? I mean, there, but for the grace of God, go I. So that really is very impactful, that saying to me. Everything you said as far as getting involved it's absolutely right on. With us, we also have thrift stores, right? So people can donate their household goods to thrift stores. We have trucks that go out on preset appointments each and every single day. They love to do that, and they pick up household goods and clothing and the like. We now have bins, actually, that are at 12 different places throughout the county as well to make it as convenient for people as possible. So that's a way. So it's a way of being able to be a part of this mission, this great work. And also, you could also shop at these thrift stores, right? And you could also benefit in that way because great merchandise and at very, very reasonable rates as well. So that's a way of doing it. You mentioned donations. Of course, donations are important. In fact, people who leave legacy gifts to us and bequests. Right. And so those are very important. In fact, Gene Burkhardt, that gift was through a legacy he's passed. And so, but he thought a lot of Father Joe's Villages, and he left us through his estate, right? And I'm very appreciative. May God rest his soul. And so there are many ways volunteering. I mean, pre-COVID, we had 10,000 volunteers. I love our volunteers.
Wow.
Can you imagine 10,000 volunteers? And I remember I used to put a dollar amount on that. That's the value of that is about $4 million. Right. Can you imagine? And now we're up to about half that. And so we're growing our ranks again. But even 4,000 to 5,000, that's a lot of volunteers, right?
That is.
I take a lot of pride to spend time with our volunteers because I'm very proud of them. And so that's a way. We have our Ladies Guild, which is a force of these women with 200 plus individuals who their work is just with Father Joe's Villages on a volunteer basis, either holding birthday parties for the kids, or now when Christmas and the holidays come around, and what they do there is special for them as well. So that's you ladies out there who want to come in and get involved with the Ladies Guild. That's a way of doing it as well. But contact us at neighbor.org, as you mentioned, Maggie, right? And there wealth of information on our website, neighbor.org. And people can also call 619-HOMELESS, and that's a way of getting a hold of us and receiving additional information also.
One of the things I think I hear from people often, because we're not a direct service provider, we oversee federal and state funding. And a lot of times I'll hear people say that, that the government should be able to cover all of this, or that they don't need to donate because we've got government money going to providers. And I don't think that generally, it's not people's profession to understand that the federal and state funding requires what is known as a match. And so for a provider to get these type of grants, they have to fundraise. They need the volunteers that have a value, a dollar value. They need the donations. For every financial bequeath or every volunteered hour, that a provider can then count that towards applying for funding to bring to the community, makes you very competitive, but also you're required to fund a portion of all of these programs with that level of donations. So it is a way to sort of supercharge those donations to be able to match them with federal and state money, which is just so critical. And we couldn't do it without it.
You're right. The housing is a perfect example. even on this housing that we're building, it's important to get that philanthropic portion. The majority of it is publicly funded, as we know, right? But there's that philanthropic portion, and if you get that in early on, then you can show the funders, hey, you know what? The community is committed to this, right? And then they step up. But so that private-public partnership is so very, very critical.
So many opportunities for the community to get involved.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Well, thank you again, Tamara, CEO of RTFH, and Deacon Jim, President and CEO of Father Joe's Villages. Can you tell people where they can learn more about your organization?
Well, you can find us on our website, rtfhsd.org. It is, understand that I oversee government money, so there are some government things on there, but we are truly a nonprofit, so there are places you can find our nonprofit work there as well.
And our website is even easier to remember. It's neighbor.org. And think about our motto is neighbors helping neighbors, right? So neighbor.org. I would encourage your listeners and the viewers to really look us up and see how they can get involved. To Tamara's point, that's what it's all about, right? We're not here, I believe we're not here on this earth just for ourselves. We're meant to be here for one another. And when we recognize that, that's when we come together as a community and the whole becomes healthier, right? So that's what it's all about.
Wonderful. And if you've done this work long enough, the people that you work with become your dear friends, and you understand that it's more than just a job, it's a mission. That's, the importance of recognizing it's about people, the people that we're working with that are experiencing homelessness, but also the people that are our peers and support us in this work as well.
And thank you, Maggie. Thanks for having us.
Yes, thank you for being here. Thanks for joining us today. The next episode of our Neighbors Helping Neighbors podcast will air in 2 weeks. In this upcoming installment, our spotlight will be on our Meeting Basic Needs pillar of care. It will encompass our impactful Turning the Key initiative, our commitment to affordable housing, and the essential support provided by our food services programs and emergency food pantry. We'll also offer a sneak peek into the upcoming Hunger and Homelessness Awareness Week and our famous Thanksgiving Day 5K. Our turkey trot has become a San Diego tradition, and we hope to see you there burning some calories before your first bite of apple pie. Remember, you can make a difference by volunteering, donating, and taking action today at neighbor.org. We are all neighbors helping neighbors, and together we can do better. Thank you.